Hello and welcome back to another history video where we do a document deep dive. Oh, that's actually a nice name for this series, I guess. Maybe I will think about that. Anyway, this time I'm going to do something a bit different. Now, there's a lot said about German operations on the internet, lots of videos about this or that offensive or desperate last stand or whatever. But what many people forget is that, especially on the Eastern Front, due to there being a vast front between offensives and in some sectors for much of the war, let's put it like that, there was basically not that much going on. It was trench warfare because there was not presently an offensive. And so both sides kind of held the line while the battle was waged somewhere else. And some divisions actually stayed in these sectors for a long time. One prime example is the 121st Infantry Division, which for a long stretch of the war was in the Volkow sector, which is in the northern part of the Eastern Front, and which basically was about the siege of Leningrad. So because of that, there wasn't a lot of big actions going on there. And now this is a map from mid-1943, where you can see the positions here, 121, this is 121st Infantry Division defending here the front line. Now, they didn't always defend the same stretch of front, they were often shuffled around. And what we'll do today is we will see what happened when they were put into a new sector, how did they organize their defense, and what was their what were their tactics, how did they fare in these trench warfare conditions when there was really not much going on, what were they actually doing. So what we have here is a divisional order that they got when they took over a new sector. It's divisional order number 24. And it says here that the division has arrived in the new operating area, and they took over their sectors, and they think that there will be 8 to 10 weeks in this operational sector, right? And there are 3 areas where the division has tasks. First of all, defending the sector. Second of all, improving the position. And third of all, training. Now, for defense of the sector, they just say you have to defend this sector that you just have taken over. And there's 2 documents there that pertain to this. First of all, the sector borders, and then the actual organization of the troops. So this document tells us where the units were at this front sector. So as you can see, it's about the 121st Infantry Division, and as any infantry division at the time, they had 3 regiments, Grenadier Regiment 408, Grenadier Regiment 407, and Grenadier Regiment 405. And these are their positions, and as you can see, these symbols here denote where their borders lie. So this is the border to their neighboring unit, and this, of course, to the neighboring division, which they were not supposed to cross, because otherwise that would lead to chaos, friendly fire, and so on. This is, by the way, something that I always find a bit weird when you get people who have what I like to call drunk the PR Kool-Aid and who think that it's realistic in a battlefield type game to have as little OOB borders as possible, because in reality you would just be able to go there and flank the enemy. Well, it's kind of nonsense, because as you can see, there totally were just arbitrary borders on the map where they weren't supposed to cross. I mean, technically they could do it, but it was quite risky. And of course there's other gameplay reasons why that's done. But yeah, this is what that looked like. Also quite interesting. We have here a radio schematic. So this shows you where the radios were and how they were supposed to be connected to the front position. So you can see here the front positions, 3rd Company, 408th, 2nd Company, 408th, and so on. So as you can see, the Germans at this point in mid-43, so this is late April, early May, had about 1 receiver in each of these company HQs, and not a lot more. Obviously, they were also cabled, but this is the radios that they had in one infantry division. So what did the front line actually look like? Well, this is what it was supposed to be built up for. So we had the main position here, which was the trench line, And inside this trench line, there were Kampfstände, which is basically a fighting position that they could shoot out of. And you can see the field of fire here. Now, this is a schematic to help them build these positions. Now, behind the trench, there was a water barrier or a water ditch with a little bridge. And zu den Wohnbunker basically means that behind the front line here somewhere would be the living quarters, also in bunkers, obviously. And yeah, this is a trench line which would be fairly lightly manned with machine guns in these fighting positions. And as you can see here in front of it, there's a wire obstacle, which you also can see here from the front. One thing I should note, I say trench, but the Germans actually in these documents do not use the word Schützengraben, which means trench. And as you can see here, these were kind of built above ground, right? Because the terrain there is extremely swampy. So a trench would immediately run full of water, which is why they have a water ditch behind their lines. And these were built as palisades, basically. And yeah, you can see here there are Spanish riders, and between that wire obstacles. Behind these defensive lines there would be pack positions to destroy tanks that broke through. Now this is not only swampy but also extremely forested terrain, and what they did was, as you can see here, I will zoom in a bit, they have a pack position here, and then they would build these fire breaks into the forest. And it says a bit lower down here, these would be 4 to 6 meters broad, and they would be cut into the forest for the pack to shoot through. And between that there would be thick forest, which the tanks probably wouldn't be able to cross. So you had this kind of spider web of anti-tank shots going through. And here this is the front line with the trenches in front of that. The HKL, that's a term to keep in mind. HKL basically means Hauptkampflinie or main battle line. And the area behind the main battle line would be the Hauptkampffeld, the main battlefield, which was covered by pack and where artillery positions and command posts and so on were. And before the HKL would be listening posts and yeah, stuff like that. Alright, back to the divisional order. Now the next point here, point A, is about enemy intentions, and they say that it is likely that the enemy, after their setbacks near Kabusel, would regroup and try to keep attacking at different points, right? And they say that these are the most likely points for local Russian attacks, namely in the sector of Grenadier Regiment 405 at the land bridge and the Stachelweg. This must be a German term for some kind of local landmark. They usually gave these landmarks nicknames. Stachelweg kind of means like thorny path or something like that, thorny way. In the Grenadier Regiment 407 district along the Dubok Valley, which is the valley of a little river or creek, and at the Grenadier Regiment 408 at the position along the railroad dam or the railroad track. Because of that, the regiments have to put the Schwerpunkt of their defense into these sectors. So in the next part here, they're talking about reserves and how important they are in case of an enemy breakthrough. It is extremely important to have local reserves that are very close to the actual front, so they can immediately gain back the main battle line. And they go into detail here. So every platoon has to have 5 to 6 men in reserve. Every company has to have one group, so one squad, 8 to 10 men in reserve. Every battalion, one platoon. And every regiment, one company. So these were to be kept in reserve to counterattack whenever the enemy broke through. With growing strength, when we get ersatz and replacement troops and convalescent troops, these reserves have to be strengthened. So their goal is that every battalion has one complete company as a reserve, but they are not quite there yet. And it also says here that the Radfahr company, the bicycle company, which right now is usually used as reserves, should not necessarily be used for that because they're for scouting. It also says that for the counter-attacking reserves of platoons or companies, the best and most, how would you translate that, most hardy men to be used, and they are to be equipped with hand grenades and submachine guns. And every company and battalion reserve has to have one specialized tank close combat troop, so a troop that has been schooled in taking out tanks with improvised means or with magnetic mines, that kind of thing. It also says here that the divisional reserves have to scout the area for possibilities where they can use or where they can establish blocking positions if there's an enemy breakthrough, and where they can counterattack from, and put that on the map so everybody knows where to do that. So task C for the defense is where to use the weapons, or which weapons to use. And apparently, because the 121st was in combat before this assignment, they have to reorganize a bit, and it also says that every usable weapon has to be gotten from the second line troops and put up in the front. So apparently they had some problems here, and the goal has to be that every rifleman company, so every grenadier company, has to have 9 light machine guns and 2 light grenade launchers, so 2 light mortars, the 5 cm ones. Every MG company has 6 heavy machine guns, 6 heavy mortars. Every infantry gun company has 6 light and 2 heavy infantry guns. And every tank hunter company has 9 light puck, 2 medium puck, and 2 heavy puck. It also says that the infantry gun companies have to use in this sector the DO devices, which are heavy Wurfrahmen rocket launchers, so 28 to 32 centimeter rocket launchers, rocket projectors. And so these are apparently in this sector already on hand and have been taken over by the division to be used by the infantry gun guys. And any puck that is newly delivered is not to be put into the main battle line, but into the main battlefield in depth, as we looked at in the earlier diagram with the fire breaks and so on. Time to look at the actual divisional diagram and the weapons that were on hand. So as always, we begin with the artillery. And what's interesting here, so first of all, they have batteries of 10.5 centimeter guns, light field howitzers, and they only have 3 in each of the batteries, so not 4 as was usual. They also have a heavy Abteilung, and these have French guns. So you can see there's a little F here. So these are 15.2 centimeter French howitzers that they have in artillery support. We will look at a bit more of that a bit later. Then we have the main line infantry. Here you can see the 3 regiments that were already mentioned. And as you can see here, they did achieve their stated numbers of light machine guns and light grenade launchers mostly. So 9 is actually among the lower numbers, so most of them have like 10 or 11 light machine guns in each company. So that would mean a 3-squad organization probably for each platoon, and each squad would have a light machine gun. Now, what's quite interesting here is they apparently also achieved the anti-tank gun numbers, because what you can see here is each of these regimental anti-tank gun units had 6 3.7 centimeter puck, 2 medium puck, so 5 centimeter, and 2 7.5 centimeter puck. These could be 7.5 centimeter puck 40, or the interim solution puck 97/38, the one that we recently introduced in FH2. The machine gun companies here apparently had a bit more heavy machine guns than needed, but not always all the mortars. Like here there's a few mortars missing, 8 centimeter ones. But yeah, other than that, they're pretty up to strength here. Down here, Schnelle Abteilung, that basically means fast battalion, and these are the scout troops for all intents and purposes. What's interesting here is they apparently have some 7.62 centimeter Russian pucks in support, but also 12 light pucks from early war, 4 here, and these seem to be partly motorized as well. So yeah, these are the scout troops, including possibly the aforementioned bicycle platoon. Okay, then Pioneers. Also had Pioneers. They don't have a lot of light machine guns here. I wonder if they were somewhat under strength. And then, of course, we have all the second line stuff here. Now, if we look at the weapons, first of all, these are the normal kind of guns that they had. So bayonets, Luger, Walther, miscellaneous pistols, 660 MP, probably MP38/MP40, 101 Russian MPs, so that's quite a few, so PPSHs, or at this point maybe still PPDs at points. Then, of course, a ton of K98K. They also have 276 miscellaneous carbines. Could be anything, probably with German ammunition. 42 K98K with ZF41s. 419 rifle grenade launchers. 9 MG26T. 11 World War II issue MG0815. We will look at how these were used a bit later. They had one heavy machine gun 42. I think the way I read this, they were mostly still equipped with MG34. Then, sorry, they have a few Nebelwerfers here. These might be the DO launchers or DO devices that were mentioned. They captured one Russian anti-tank rifle, 4 12-centimeter Russian mortars, and one 45mm PAK, also Russian. 89 Deckungszielgerät. I think these are devices that allow you to use a scope from like over the rivetment of a trench, basically. Like you can shoot from cover with that. Then they have bodenständige Waffen, so these are weapons that are built into the front line, and they mention here 5 Dektarev MGs, 2 heavy Russian MGs, so Maxims basically, 6 light grenade launchers, also Russian, 4 medium grenade launchers, also Russians, and then 71 heavy French machine guns. And my guess is that these were taken over and were built into some of these firing positions that we looked at in the trench diagram, that these were that these had these heavy French machine guns in them, and then whatever unit rotated into the trenches to defend them took their own German machine gun with them, or machine guns, and the French ones stayed in there, and possibly at some point deteriorated as well, but I can only imagine. Also had some 45mm PAK, and and actually these are the DO devices. Actually, they had 19 schwere Wurfrahmen 41, so these are the heavy rocket launchers. So I guess the Nebelwerfers that were mentioned here are possibly different ones that are also on hand. Now, devotees of Forgotten Op 2 might be familiar with some of this stuff, namely on Operation Mars, we have a similar position. And we also have a captured French machine gun here, which is built into a static position. And we even renamed that to the German designation, which is Maschinengewehr 257F for French. Obviously an MG34 is a bit better, but yeah, this is what that might have looked like to a degree. So yeah, that's on Operation Mars, of course. We can get into some more detail here as well. So here it shows some more organizational detail. First of all, it shows which units were attached to which regiment. So for example, Regiment 405 had Alarm Battalion 121, which we will look at later, and parts of the Fast Battalion, so of the scouting troops. 407 had nobody, and 408 had parts of the grenade launching company or the launcher company, so this might actually have been the Nebelwerfers or the Wurfgerät. Now, what's also interesting here is how did the infantry and the artillery work together. And each infantry regiment had one artillery battery in support, right? So first battery supported 405, and second battery, so at this point there were still batteries from the division that they replaced in here, but later the second battery would support Grenadier Regiment 407 and the third battery 408. And the heavy one, so these three are the ones with 10.5 centimeter howitzers, and the heavy one with the French guns would be supporting the division, right? So the division had access to that. And it says here it was to be used as a Schwerpunktsgruppe, so basically that means wherever shit was really going down, that's where they would be assigned. So they couldn't call them indirectly, but if the sector was threatened, they would blast them with the French guns. And then there were divisional reserves, the Schnelle Abteilung, so the fast ones, and the Pioneer Battalion were in reserve, and they tell us here as well where they were camped out. Ulvenlager and P-Lager, so Pioneer Lager, are basically the names of their camps. Alright, so the next point in the divisional order here is reconnaissance. So number one is our own reconnaissance. So after they basically had a feel of their sector, they had to start by doing scout troops. And the goal of these scout troops is to find the enemy position and where it is, how many people are in there, how well it is fortified, and try to ascertain what the enemy's intention is, right? So, and it says here that any inclination that the enemy is changing something, for example, the behavior or how everything looks, they had to immediately tell that to the higher ups, right? They had to immediately report that. And they say here that even if the reports may seem basically pointless, it is important for the leadership to gain a picture of the enemy's intention and what they want to do. And there has to be in every battalion sector one officer for reconnaissance who basically gets all the reports and puts them together and tries to get the most important nuggets of information out of that. So after they did some scouting missions, they had to do little raids, Stoßtrupp-Unternehmens, basically a raiding operation. And the goal here is to get prisoners and that's basically it. Get prisoners in these raids. And they say here that alarm units are not to be used for that. So we heard alarm units twice now, so it's best maybe to take a look at what that actually is. Now this here is in order to create an alarm battalion. And an alarm battalion is basically a unit that is to be used in a kind of blocking role as soon as shit really hits the fan. It is to be made from second line troops who are otherwise kind of useless in a big battle situation or who would be behind the lines. And it basically says here where they are to be camped out and what their tasks are, and also how they are to be organized, which you can get from this document. Interestingly, they do not name rifles here, only machine pistols, light machine guns, and rifle grenade equipment, and light mortars as well. But basically, they were to be organized like a normal rifle platoon. With each squad would be 9 people with one light machine gun and one submachine gun and one rifle grenade launcher. That's basically it. A bit later, I won't go there now, but a bit later it also says that some of the French machine guns that they had in reserve were to be assigned to this unit. And my guess is that the light machine guns here would have been the Czech and World War I era types that we saw in the divisional document. So these would be used by this alarm company and only used in an emergency. Is my guess. I don't have complete proof of that, but that would make sense to me. Back to reconnaissance. So the next point is enemy reconnaissance, and basically, as is probably clear, the goal is to hinder and make more difficult enemy reconnaissance. And it says here it is of the utmost importance that the enemy is not able to take any prisoners. So if there's night and fog, only double posts can be posted in the trenches. And in dark nights and really thick fog, these double posts, they have to be twice the number basically to man the positions. An officer who is apparently, obviously more valuable than a private when captured, if they have a trench duty, They are only allowed into the trenches when escorted by at least 3 men. So one officer with one escort who goes first, and then 2 men as a covering troop who would go behind them. Any scouting party has to be strong, 10 men. And raids even stronger. And any raid that is in platoon strength or bigger has to be registered with the division before being done, so the division can sign off on it in case there's risks, basically. It is also important to notice the registering of enemy batteries, and also if they improve their positions, building new bunkers and trenches, because that can also mean that an offensive is imminent. The next big part of this order is the improvement of their own position. And there are 2 priorities here. First of all, the main battlefield has to be improved. This is the thing with the parks that I showed you earlier. And the paths and roads have to be improved, because, as I said, it's a fucking swamp. Now, it says here the main battle line in this divisional sector is mainly a above ground trench with some strewn in fighting positions, as we saw. And it says here that the fighting positions are actually very badly camouflaged. They are apparently brown, and the area around the trenches is green. And this is to be improved. It also says here that in order to ascertain that it is actually improved, somebody has to go out of the trenches in the evening to look at the main battle line from the front. And it says here, be careful of our own minds. So yeah, that's not a job I would like to have. And it also says here that the company command posts are in part in the front, so basically in the main line, and that this is a bad idea, and they have to be 100 to 150 meters behind the main battle line, together with the heavy weapons, so PAC, heavy machine gun, mortars. So those would be a second line, and from the second line, counterattacks would also be launched if the enemy breaks in. And it also says that they should improvise anti-tank obstacles behind the main battle line. There's some more stuff here, for example, that the artillery has to be also dug in and protected against shrapnel. And then it talks here at length about how to improve the roads and the paths. That they should use, for example, wooden supports, stuff like that. And it says in the end that everybody, all hands on deck, and all the leaders are to ascertain that this is done as quickly as possible. The last point is training, and it says that since the enemy has been quiet, this should be another priority. And it actually says here that its first priority is training, and the improvement of position is second priority. And they apparently got a lot of young replacements, and they have to be trained so that they are as good as their old veteran fighters. And there should be lessons, there should be demonstrations, and there should be short seminars to do this. And this is all done in the Feldersatz battalion, so in a unit whose task it is to train these new replacements. And again, there's priorities. So number 1 priority, using the weapons. And it mentions here MG, PAC, infantry gun, mortar, submachine gun, rifle, grenade launcher. Also very important, training of snipers and training of close combat tank hunting teams. And when it comes to actually training for the battle, they want to have the priority on the offensive, actually. So raiding parties are to be trained, fighting against bunkers, and then later attacks in platoon and company strength through coverless terrain or heavily forested terrain. So yeah, I think that kind of gave a picture of what they wanted to do in this new sector. Let's look at some more pressing matters that they had, or what was actually going on in terms of fighting. So, this is quite interesting. This is from the 408th Grenadier Regiment sector, namely 1st Battalion, which is at the Dubok Creek, which was mentioned earlier, which apparently goes through a railroad bridge. Probably the railroad is set on top of an embankment, and then there's a bridge where this little creek goes through. And Pioneer Battalion 121 decided to do a little prank on the Russians, and they built a dam there in order to flood the Russian trenches. And apparently all enemy areas in the north of this railroad embankment is basically flooded in a width of 500 meters. And ever since the 18th of April, the enemy has had to give up several fighting positions in this sector because they were flooded. And so far, any attempts of the Russians to destroy this dam by shooting at it with artillery have failed, right? So they say it is quite possible that the enemy will try to attack a point that they call the Hermann's Eck or Hermann's Corner, that they will try to break into our positions there and then try to demolish with explosives this dam, right? And because of that, they have to make sure that a surprise attack, but also an attack after heavy artillery preparation, can be defended against in this sector. And basically the way they were supposed to do that is to keep the regimental reserves really close, so they can immediately counterattack if there's any kind of Russian offensive. And the pioneers are also advised to improve the trenches, the fighting positions, and the living quarters so that they are safe against enemy artillery. They have to improve the wire obstacles as well. The door devices, they have to be put into this sector, and they have to be registered so that they can immediately fire their rockets at predetermined points where the enemy will likely attack. And they also say that they have the right to shoot 25 rockets in order to train and in order, I guess, to register their weapons. And then down here, there's more advice for the units here, Grenadier Regiment 407. What are they supposed to do? What is the Pioneer Battalion supposed to do? They have to leave a commando of pioneers there to actually keep an eye on that dam, because it might break as well, stuff like that. And the artillery regiment has to send a forward observer so they can adjust the Sperrfeuer, so they can adjust the defensive fires and register the ground in front of the position for their howitzers. And it also means that they should answer any attempt by the Russian artillery to fire with the double amount of shells, basically. That's the idea. And so yeah, this is how they defended this little prank that they pulled on the Russians. Oh, and down here it says how many mortar rounds they were allowed to shoot in terms of an enemy attack. So for each regiment, so you can see that here. And apparently priority was the 408th Regiment because they got 200 rounds of mortar fire to beat back attacks. So, lastly, we will take a look at one of those scouting missions that has been mentioned earlier. So this is from the 23rd of May 1943, Grenadier Regiment 408, and it's an AAR, an after-action report. Apparently they did this at night. So it first says the strength of the scouting troop. It was one leader, one assistant leader, 11 men, and 2 pioneers. And it says here they took 7 submachine guns and 1 light machine gun. And I assume the rest were armed with rifles, and maybe one guy with a pistol for the light machine gun to carry ammunition, I mean. And then it says here the mission A. They have to see if the swamp between Falkenhorst and Entenschnabel can be crossed on foot. Again, these are nicknames. Falkenhorst means something like Falcon's Peak or Falcon's Nest or something like that. Entenschnabel means duckbill. Then they had to report on the enemy main battle line. Where is it? How strong is it? How many people are in there? Is there wire? Are there mines? That kind of thing. Then if there are footpaths before the front line, are there listening posts of the enemy? or are there forward submachine gun posts. And they are, if possible, to capture a Russian, and they are not to engage in any bigger battle. So, what did actually happen at 10:30? They started from the Falcon's perch or whatever, out of their own wire obstacle. And they left 2 posts there at this wire obstacle where they crossed it in order to make sure no Russian gets through or something. At the beginning it was easy to get through. After 350 meters they found swamps that were up to 150 centimeters, so 1.50 meters deep. And it was quite hard to go through there. Apparently going through there made quite a lot of noise. When they were 100 meters in front of the enemy main battle line, the scout troop veered south. There was a Russian path that was found, but it seemed like it hadn't been used for a while. But it might have been like there was some kind of carpet there, so it might be a listening post. It's just that nobody was there, and apparently they left a capture troop there to maybe catch this listening post once the guy came back for his position, right? So they were to grab him then. And the rest of the scouting troop with their leader went up until roughly 20 meters in front of the enemy line, but there they found some felled trees that kind of impeded their progress, and 12 meters behind that there was wire. And they saw bunkers and so on. We will look at the details of that later. So at this point apparently they tried to get through that tree obstacle and made a lot of noise because of the snapping tree branches, stuff like that. And apparently at this point the Russians, put up the alarm. They rang some kind of bell, but there was no fire. So the reconnaissance troop retreated at this point, but after they were away 200 meters, the enemy suddenly opened up with a Maxim gun, but they were out of range, or rather the fire landed too short. They didn't get hit. And at 1:10 a.m. they returned without any casualties. And yeah. Also it says here that the third battery of howitzers actually shot a few shots to cover their retreat in order to make a lot of noise so that they wouldn't be heard, which is quite interesting. It also says that the mine detectors of the pioneers should have camouflage paint applied because they are made from aluminium, and apparently in the darkness they were easy to see, and they were worried about that. So yeah, not the most action-packed of all the scouting missions, but I think this is kind of the day-to-day life in the trenches, really. This is what they brought back in terms of information. So you can see they started here at their own main battle line, went through the swamp here. I think this here marks where they actually, first of all, this marks where they found the Russian path and maybe the listening post. This marks where they met the obstacle, the tree obstacle. And you can see here they marked a heavy machine gun position and other fighting positions that they scouted out, as well as the wire obstacle. So yeah, anyway, I think this is quite an interesting look at what happens when nothing happens on the Eastern Front. When all is quiet on the Eastern Front, the day-to-day life of trench warfare in 1943. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.